This video is going to talk about the basics of bill of materials and how to add them in SolidWorks. However, we are going to do a couple little brief things where we're going to talk about what to expect in some of your assembly drawings for SolidWorks as well. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start by looking at adding a bill of materials to our piece. So I'm going to go ahead and select one of my views, doesn't really matter which, and I'm going to go to annotation and then tables, and then I have the ability to grab my bill of materials right from here, and that will pull up a menu for me, which allows me to, most importantly, select the type of bill of materials that I want. And then down here, we're going to see the ability to change everything on it to all caps if we didn't happen to have everything in all caps already. So with that, we'll talk about BOM types in a second here. I know I'm meant to talk about it here, but I think it makes a little bit more sense once we actually see it. I am going to go ahead and check the all caps, which looks like it might just be barely out of the video. But with this, I have added my bill of materials to my piece. I go ahead and select back on this. I get back to my ability to change things. First of all, we can see that if I don't have my all caps on, it does not appear in all caps. We want everything in our drawings to be in all caps. And with this, we're going to go ahead and to start talking a little bit more on these bill of material types. So first one is top level only, and that's what we currently have, meaning that all of these items are the items that were directly put into my assembly. What parts only is going to be is, in this case, CL04 is actually a combination of two parts that screw together, the transition being right here. So this whole thing is CL04 that's made up of a bottom part and a top part. And instead of having them show as one part in our bill of materials, when I go ahead and I click on parts only here, you can see that it went ahead and it split it up into two, which is great. And then our last piece is indented, which is the combination. So it's going to show us our top only, but it's also going to show the pieces underneath it. So now it is still showing the CL04, which is the entirety of this blue piece right here. However, it shows that under it, I have two pieces. I have the CL041, which is the base portion, so this portion of it, and CL042, which is the top portion of it. And there's not necessarily a wrong choice here. I tend to prefer indented bills of materials. However, if you have very large subassemblies, it normally makes sense to just do top level only. Feel like if you're using parts only, you probably could have just made your piece with parts only, although there are occasions where it becomes particularly helpful. Next thing we're going to notice is if we scroll out here, you notice that I have a part number that is actually a description. That's the same thing, claw finger and claw finger. And that is not what I want. I want it to be a part number like all the other part numbers here. And that's because it is not pulling correctly from the document. So in order to access it, I'm actually going to show you a quick little trick here that works both when working on assemblies or when working on drawings. We can right-click on the part we are interested in. Let me zoom in here. Oh, I'm showing off that it's claw finger. Sorry, got ahead of myself. If I right-click on this piece up top, this guy right here is going to allow me to open up the part file for this piece so that I can see what's going on, or I can modify it as I need to. So I have this guy open. I go back into my configurations. I go into configurations, configuration properties, and oh look, right here, that part number is not Clawfinger. It should be pulling the right thing. Except what's happening is by default, it is pulling the document name. And you can see right down here, we talked about this earlier in an earlier video, but it is pulling the document name by default, and we normally don't want that. So there are two ways I can fix it. The first is going and setting it as a user specified name, and I can go ahead and just type in whatever I want, and that is stored within the part file and would update on the other. Or I can set it to be my configuration name, and I can edit my configuration name, rename tray item, and it's going to be CL01. And then when I go back, I have to save this part, but it will update for me. And when we zoom out here, we can see that it has fixed that issue for me. Okay, now we have our bill of materials. We need to label it. So we have two ways of doing it. We can balloon and we can auto balloon. I tend to grab auto balloon, not because I like where it puts the balloons. I think that has something that can be left to be desired. However, it makes sure that I don't forget to label something. So it adds all of them automatically for me. So as you can see, I've got all of these little pieces labeling my parts, and I only have one per part. But what I normally do after I auto balloon is I go ahead and I hop into my balloons and I start moving things to places that are a little bit cleaner, don't get in the way of the drawings as much, because SolidWorks will put things wherever they feel like putting them, and it's often not the easiest to interpret. One thing that I should say while doing this is if we actually switch what parts the balloons are pointing to, it will actually switch the numbers. It knows what it's pointing to, and it'll do that automatically for you. It is pulling the balloon numbers from the item numbers right here. So we can see so part number 1 is part number CL01, and that is the claw connector, and that is this piece right here. So that is using balloons. Particularly helpful there. Now I'm going to go ahead and point out a few things. The first one that I just zoomed in on here is, you notice the material is blank. That is because the materials of this are right up here. Materials are your bill of materials. For assembly drawings, you should never have a material in them. That just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And then a couple other pieces while we are on the screen. As far as views, you're normally going to have an exploded view. You're going to normally have a isometric view, because these exploded view shows how things go together. Isometric view shows what it looks like when it comes together. And then you might have one or two of your front view, side view, etc. that you think could be important or could be helpful to see. Because these can get quite large, we can go to a new page, which for some reason is cut off of this view. But because the bottom of my video cut off, and I apologize for that. But with that, we can create a new page, which is what I try to point out at the end of this video. Unfortunately, it is off the screen. And you can move normally with how large this bill of materials is and having to have some view. It doesn't have to be the exploded view that is labeled. You could easily put all of these guys onto your isometric view if that made more sense and that was a little bit easier to interpret where things are. That is allowed, but we normally want to pull that view and this bill of materials to another page. Even when we're not using this tiny piece of paper, because part of the reason this bill of materials looks so large is because we are on letter size 8.5 by 11 paper. Still haven't gotten around to updating this, so please ignore that. But with that, that is our assembly drawings and labeling. Take care.